Welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to the tank review on the IS-2 Revenge for the Hero Brother, which is a Soviet rank 4 battle rating 6.3 premium heavy tank. It is equipped with the largest gun on a heavy tank at this battle rating, and it is very similar to its tech tree counterpart, the IS-2 Mod 1944. I will give you a full rundown on the statistics on this tank, we'll compare it to its major opponents on the battlefield, we'll give you tips and tricks how to make this tank work, but also how to take it out effectively on the battlefield. Furthermore, I will answer the question if this tank is worth the money. The IS-2 always was a very iconic tank within War Thunder, and especially the Mod 1944 had a bit of controversial aura around it. It also is kind of one of the key aspects in the so-called Russian bias discussion. The IS-2 Mod 1944 with its premium version, the IS-2 Revenge, on which I actually make the tank review on, are solid tanks, but they are not really heavy tanks when you compare it to tanks like the Kingtiger or the recent addition, the T-29. Therefore, recently the battle rating was reduced by 0.3 from 6.7 to 6.3. Technically it's 0.4, but you get the point. And it also got its post-war shell removed. How does this affect the tank? Well, overall it actually gives this tank a better performance. This tank is a nice tank in realistic, and it's also a decent tank in arcade. However, this tank is all about the Alpha Strike, the first shot, the one-shot capability. And especially with introductions such as the Last Man Standing, which it was called some patches ago in realistic, and then also got somehow introduced in another shape or form into arcade, really hurts this tank. Furthermore, recently APHE shells, especially the big ones, don't perform that reliably anymore as they did a few patches ago. I think that's enough rambling. Let's begin with the actual tank review. Let's talk about the armor first, and we can see that we have the lower plate here with 100mm at 29 degrees slope backwards, giving it an effective thickness of around about 120mm, with some additional tracks being here in the middle. So here it is effectively 155mm. Still, this is a weak spot. Overall, relatively easy to hit and penetrate. The tech tree version, the Mod 1944, has here some additional tracks, as you can see, but overall not too much difference. The upper plate here is 120mm thick, slope backwards at 61 degrees to 60 degrees. Effective thickness is around about 230mm. In practice, that means just heat shells and APDS shells have here a chance to go through. Every other APHE or solid shot will not go through this plate. In this respect, this plate is relatively similar to the Kingtiger's front plate. But we have here a weak spot with 129mm of effective thickness, this driver slit, but it's a very small target indeed. And if you miss that, you still hit the upper plate where you bounce, or this part here, which is sloped even further backwards with 70 degrees, giving it an effective thickness of over 300mm. The side of the tank is armored behind the tracks with 90mm, as well as on the engine deck. Then here on the turret back we go down to, or we go up to 100mm, then to 115mm in the middle of the turret, and 130mm here in front of the turret. Furthermore, we have this 115mm plating here, together with this overlap, or this part here that is going down from the front plate, still 120mm. And immediately we can see that it is symmetrical, and it also tells you immediately don't side scrape with this tank. However, you can sometimes create some funny bounces if you then try to trick enemies into shooting here, if you hide this part of the tank. The rear of the tank is armored with 60 millimeters at various angles, giving an effective thickness of around about 80 to 90 millimeters, which is still decent with some additional tracks. The top of the tank and the top of the turret is protected by 30 millimeter of armor, and that protects you from most cannon fire. But again, rockets and bombs will have no problem penetrating here, at least the blast that is. Then we have to talk about the turret, and the turret is where this tank is really funny indeed. If you don't look at it too closely, you might not really see where the trick is. First of all, we have this very difficult to hit turret ring of 100 millimeters. Effective thickness is about 116 millimeters. Then we have the turret front itself, and you can see it's rounded and angled, and the overall thickness is 100 millimeters. That doesn't sound too great, but we have here this part that is flat, and here this region here is the only part that you can reliably penetrate. If you go up here and here and here, you already bounce even with the Kingtiger cannon. Then we have here this shield here. You technically still can penetrate here easily with 100 millimeter penetration rounds, but this area where the two armor plates meet, we have a little bit of overlay, so it's around about 200 millimeters and a little bit of angling, which creates some weird bounces very often. The gun mantle itself is 200 millimeters thick. Then you also have this big muzzle brake that also can deflect certain shots. And then the right hand side is a bit of a bigger target. However, we have here again a big overlay with the turret front of 100 millimeters. So this area here that seems to be a very flat and easy to penetrate target is in fact 200 millimeter plus thick. And again, even here you can't penetrate with the Kingtiger anymore. And even here you can see that immediately we go out of this rather small part here, and we immediately bounce here with actually every gun in the game. Furthermore, we have some overlay here in this area, so even if you shoot like the turret front from this side and you penetrate here, there is also this frame here. It's a bit difficult to see in the armor review, but in fact we have some drastic overlays. Then we also can shot trap this tank theoretically, and in test drives it works. In practice it has never happened to me, and I also never did it in the actual battle, so do not try to really go for it, it's rather unreliable. Another relatively reliable hit zone is the commander's cupola with 90 millimeters of effective thickness, and it is a rather prominent target. And even if you try to go hull down or hide yourself in retreat, this cupola is very often easy to hit, but it is a target reserved for kind of APHE shells. Then the side of the turret again is 100 millimeters thick, and we have a lot of flat parts here, but again, as soon as you go here in this area and this area and also this area here, you become very often some weird bounces. Overall, the turret is better armored than on the Kingtiger, but again, you really can't effectively angle it. On the other hand, you create some funny bounces. About the armor, we can say overall that it is easy to penetrate in theory. In practice, especially when you rock forwards and backwards when somebody tries to shoot at you, you can mess up their shots and they hit parts that suddenly creates bounces. So let's look in the inside of this tank, and we can see that we have 4 crew members. The driver is sitting in the middle of the front. Then there we have a loader on the left hand side, the gunner together with the commander sitting on the right hand side. That means 1 turret penetration will kill 3 out of the 4 crew, giving you an instant kill in realistic. Then also we have the big fuel tanks in the front with the transmission and the engine together with the radiators being in the back. There is this funny joke that people actually sometimes reverse backwards into the battle, Nowadays, not such a good idea, as engines also like to explode. However, the overwhelming majority of deaths will occur because of ammunition hits. Overall, we have 28 rounds of two-staged ammunition with very big warheads being all mounted in the back of the turret, and we have propellant charges here all over the tank. The simple tip that I can give you is, for a normal average battle, remove 10 of your rounds. That will empty this ammo rack here and remove also a few of the warheads here. But overall, that does not really help you. To not get penetrated in the first place is what keeps you alive in battle. So I think that's enough theory crafting. Let's talk about the actual firepower and mobility. When it comes to the mobility of the IS-2 Mod 1944 and the IS-2 Revenge, again, both tanks are exactly the same. We have here the second weakest engine with just 520 horsepower, but that's not that tragic because we are also by far the lightest of the heavy tanks with just 46 tons, giving us a specific horsepower to ton ratio of 11.3, which is kind of average amongst the heavy tanks. Just the T26E11, the Super Pershing, has a significant lower horsepower to ton ratio with 10, and just the Carnarvon has a significantly better horsepower to ton ratio by over 20% with 13.7. The top speed is joint best with 42 km an hour with the Kingtigers, and the reverse speed with 16 km an hour is actually pretty good and fantastic indeed. The problem with the IS-2s is that they have no neutral steering, and you kind of feel the length of the tank, so that means maneuvering is not as easy. In fact, it is outright awful, and it is in this respect comparable with the T-29. However, you can go out of cover and reverse back into cover again and take the shot that is necessary, which we will come to right now when we talk about the firepower. When it comes to the business end of the IS-2 series, we are certainly on the big size scale of cannons. A 122mm D25T cannon gives the IS-2s the biggest gun on any heavy tank up until this point, if we exclude the KV-2, which has more or less a howitzer. Ammunition wise, we have a problem because 28 rounds are not a lot of ammunition. On the other hand, your drastic reload of 20.8 seconds is by far the longest, and the percentage difference to the other heavy tanks must be noted here. 40% longer reload than the T-29s and the Super Pershing guns, nearly 60% longer reload than the Kingtigers, and nearly 70% longer reload to the fantastic 20-pounder on the Carnarvon. Just gives you an impression how important the first strike is, and you have to make that count. Furthermore, you have the slowest turret rotation speed with 13.2 degrees per second. That is nearly just half of what you have on the Super Pershing, but granted, that is more or less a medium tank variant. Then the gun depression is an awful -3 degrees and is just not even a third of what you get on the American and British tanks, and even gets outclassed by over 5 degrees most of the time by the Kingtigers. The gun elevation, on the other hand, with +20 degrees, is on the better side. Let's talk about the ammunition, and the first shell that I want to present you is the stock APHE shell, the BR-471. And this is a very heavy 25 kilogram warhead traveling at 795 meters per second, at least at the muzzle brake, and it has a TNT equivalent filling of 272 grams. That is a lot. Furthermore, we have a relatively sensitive fuse sensitivity of 15 millimeters with a fuse delay of 1.2 meters. That means in practice, what you penetrate mostly gets one-shotted because the shell explodes most of the time at exactly the right place. Furthermore, as I mentioned, because of the caliber, you overmatch certain armor platings and also have the benefit of having relatively low bouncing chances. Furthermore, the penetration is on the rather lower side for this kind of heavy tank overall penetration with 200 millimeters initially, and therefore you have the upgraded shell. The BR-471B shell travels at just 5 meters per second faster, has the same weight, the same TNT equivalent high explosive filling, and the same fuse delay and fuse sensitivity. And it just delivers a marginal improvement in terms of penetration with 207 millimeters more, with 207 millimeters initially. So this is the upgraded shell, and after you have this, there is actually no use of using the stock shell anymore. Now, the IS-2 Revenge and the IS-2 Mod 1944 recently got their battle rating reduced from 6.7 to 6.3, as I previously mentioned, and the BR-471D got removed, which was the shell that actually was intended to penetrate the mouse. However, now you no longer can face the mouse according to the battle rating, but does that mean you can no longer deal no damage to the mouse? In fact, you still can. Let me show you some scenes to you. So we are here in the test drive, and this is the BR-471B. You still can penetrate the turret front. You also can shot trap the mouse, and if that is not enough, you also can shoot through the gun mantle. As you can see here, number 1, killing the gunner, and number 2, killing the gunner again and damaging the gun barrel. The third shell type is the stock OF-471 shell, and that is a high explosive shell. It also weighs 25 kilograms. It also, like the BR-471B, travels with 800 meters per second, and the TNT equivalent of 3.6 kilograms is enough to penetrate 36 millimeters of armor at any distance, at any angle. 36 millimeters can penetrate most deck armors, and with the exception of the Kingtiger, by the way, and with the new overmatch mechanic or the hull break mechanic, that utterly destroys any light vehicle that you hit with it. 800 meters per second again is kind of on par with the 85mm guns on the T-34-85s and the IS-1s, the 100mm guns mounted on the SU-100 and also the T-34-100, T-44-100 and also the T-54s, and also all other 122mm variants with the exception of the T-10Ms 122mm. So you have to learn to use this gun in the first place to continue throughout the rest of the Russian tech tree. The problem with this high explosive shell is you have a limited ammunition account, and the reload is so long that most of the situations where you effectively can use this shell are gone. On the other hand, when you play excessively arcade, and for some bizarre reason we might get a reincarnation of the good old days where IS-4s and IS-3s get spammed out, with this shell you could splash the driver's hatch and reliably one-shot those tanks. But it's more of a theory than a real practical thing. That's the end of all the theory crafting. Let's have a look at some gameplay. And you saw some gameplay previously, and it was carefully selected. It was an arcade battle where you could see the advantages and disadvantages of this tank, especially with the last man standing. It really hurts this tank in arcade, in my opinion, because you need the one-shot kill. And the reload exposes you and makes you vulnerable, and the enemy just knows where you are. And in this respect, the tank has its advantages, if you don't get rammed by teammates, that is. For example, like that. I'm sideways on and I spot something in the distance and it's gone. This Comet 1 had no chance. This shell just flies through. As you will see in a moment or in the actual battle, I use this tank not as a frontline heavy tank like the Kingtiger or the T-29. I use it more like of an extremely fat Hellcat, or a super Hellcat. But then on the other hand you have much more armor, but much less mobility. That might surprise you a little bit. I always try to ambush the enemy and always try to get along with some teammates to get simple and easy shots like that. This is your bread and butter in this tank. Everything else is taking you at a very high risk. You need to have always a plan how to retreat. I have no idea why I didn't get a second capture, but it's alright. The thing about the IS-2 is you need to have a plan how to retreat and how to make the reload work. And then also try to surprise the enemy, get a safe shot into them and just delete them. And the only thing that the enemy team has to know of your presence is the disappearing blue dots on their radar. In this respect it's relatively similar again to the Super Hellcat. However, the Super Hellcat is at the same battle rating, funnily enough, but you know, has always the excuse of being very mobile and a tank destroyer and does not really fulfill the frontline role. Yeah, this is what you do with shamans. It's kind of unfair, to be honest, but it's always very satisfying to just delete a tank like that, to just aim center mass, pull the trigger and see them explode. And that is the reason why Kingtigers are so damn hard. And that is actually the downside of the removal of the BR-471D, because there you had a chance to penetrate the lower plate and also penetrate the transmission. And then the shell one-shotted the Kingtiger. It is very unlikely, however theoretically possible, to do the same with the BR-471B, which is now your top-end shell. As you can see, I'm now patrolling here at the between the spawn points, because my team has here the advantage and I want to suppress the enemy early on. But it's also a very risky position, because I can for sure delete the first enemy like this one. Sorry mate, you were too slow giving me my fourth kill. But if now a second one gets around the corner, he just can hunt me for at least 20 seconds. And when he hits my loader, I have an insanely long reload and the reload gets interrupted, giving them additional time. Destroying my cannon, yeah, it's, you know, it doesn't need any further introduction, as well as the cannon breach. I don't have any secondary weapon, like for example the mouse or the M6A1 in this respect. And also I don't have the 50 caliber machine gun that the Tech Tree version gets. But I think that the additional fence on the side of the turret is more a cosmetic thing, as really useful in War Thunder. It looks really silly indeed, and I actually have you know, unselected the module on the Tech Tree version. So here we can see the hull break mechanic, which really benefits this tank. I might have hit the ammunition, but I think ultimately this tank would have died anyways by getting hit by such a massive shell. And you can see how long the reload is and how you have to adapt your playstyle. So at this moment I thought I could help my teammates at the last capture zone that we have to take at sea. And then I see my teammate, the IS-2, simply explode and I see the concrete wall disappear. I look in the direction from where the shot had to come and I see this American tank, and he actually missed me, not by much, but he still missed me because I reversed into cover. The reverse gear is what makes this tank playable. I did not take my chances because for a moment I thought it would be a Walker Bulldog, and he shoots again, and now I can drive in front of him, you know, using his reload, but ultimately I have no shot on him, and I see another Sherman variant just simply driving in the open. I wait for him, and this is a very, very easy shot on this M4A3 E2, which also got a battle rating reduction, but it did not really help him in this situation. Actually, this tank has some nice frontal armor, but practically you can again penetrate it everywhere with this massive 122mm gun. So how to make this tank work is simple. You go with your teammates, you try to stay on flat terrain. I will put a link to my guide how to get more gun depression on the battlefield in the video description. Have a look at this. There I try to explain how to work around poor gun depression on a tank. Furthermore, you know, always have an escape plan for the reload, and if you have to play against an IS-2, try to interrupt his reload and put pressure onto him and isolate him and hunt him down. Every hit that you can make on this tank will have fatal consequences, and so the ultimate tip for this tank, unlike on a tank like the T-29 and the Kingtiger, is that you have to always reload before you further advance, because very often there is that one guy that you have not seen and that kills your loader. It has happened to me very often in the beginning, so that it became second nature to wait for the reload. Same goes to a certain degree for other tanks with long reloads. Sture Emil, Maus, E100, IS-4, IS-3 and so on. And I really did not let him take the shot. This is again another M4A3. Normally a very nice tank to drive. On the other hand, to face an IS-2 is really not fair. He has to aim carefully and then still having to pray that the shell does not bounce, ricochet and actually do damage, and I can aim literally everywhere and one-shot him. And again, this is why this tank is at the moment practically better in realistic than in arcade. But I played this tank a lot in arcades. But most of the games that I played with it were before the introduction of the Last Man Standing in the arcade version, which really, really annoys me, to be honest. It kicks in when you're down to one crew member and you still are alive, but it takes so long up until you get your crew member back. It's enough time for you in the IS-2 to actually reload. However, again, you have a rather limited ammunition account, and it just exposes you for too long, because then you want the kill. And it's very annoying if that results ultimately in a kill assist or you getting killed by another tank that you know, then noticed where you are. So I come around this middle capture zone. I hesitated for a moment because I did not see the enemy tank. Then I see this Hellcat and I carefully take aim. He reverses a little bit, but ultimately I take him out. So that was my 8th kill and ultimately the last kill on the IS-2. Now let's talk a little bit about if this tank is worth the money. First of all, the answer is no, because you get the same tank and to a certain degree slightly better when you put a talisman on the IS-2 mod 1944, which also helps you research the IS-3 faster with the 30% RP bonus that you get on top of the talisman for researching the IS-3. So if you want to hurry up with this, this is a good thing. The next thing is, I think tanks like the T-44-122, yes, it has a longer reload, but ultimately it performs like the IS-4, but having better mobility and to a certain degree also a little bit better armor on a lower profile tank. But you know, it's not really the drastic difference. The drastic difference comes into play when we compare it to the T-34-100, which in my opinion is the best Russian premium tank. I think Russians have now a very good 6.3 lineup, but the problem is that the IS-4 is more of a support heavy gun carrier than ultimately a real heavy tank. It doesn't have the reliable armor thickness that the Kingtiger has. It also doesn't bring the survivability with it that the T-29 together with the Kingtiger offers, and it also doesn't come even close to the reload speeds of the Carnarvon, the Kingtiger and the T-29/Super Pershing. But overall, you still can make this tank work. Let's have a quick look at the post-battle results. And we can see that I got over 72,000 silver lines and 7,216 research points together with a bunch of awards. I did not apply any booster, but somebody else put a 10% silver line booster for the entire team on. And yeah, I was first with 8 kills and 2,373 score points. So overall, the results are great, but you really have to work for it. And ultimately, I cannot really say that this tank can do anything better than, for example, the T-34-100 or the T-40-100 in this respect. Also, if you look back to the stat comparison, we could see that the IS-2 is in so many ways in a disadvantage, especially in comparison to the T-29 and the Kingtiger, but ultimately has the shell that has the potential to one-shot both of those tanks. However, if not, it really hurts this tank. So is the battle rating reduction justified for the removal of the shell? Ultimately, yes. In this respect, the Russians have a disadvantage, especially when you have to face multiple Kingtigers and or multiple T-29s. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you liked it, please give it a like. It helps out the channel greatly. Subscribe if you want to see more. Let me know in the comment section about your opinions, and we'll see each other on the battlefields of War Thunder.